All right, so here is Revelation for all of us, and we've completed actually 3 chapters of the book of Revelation. And okay, one of the things that we did last time, if you remember, is that I had given this chart for all of us. So, in case you were not present last class, I wanted to again show this chart today because a lot of Revelation depends on how we understand. Okay, so you don't need to understand everything now, but there are a few words, na kichu kichu shabdo, few words that you need to keep in mind. So, when you look at the top, okay, there is a word called, the comparison of Christian millennial teaching. Millennial means Christ's 1,000-year reign that will happen on earth, that the book of Revelation talks about. So when you look at the first of the picture, you recognize that the Bible is talking about tribulation. Okay, tribulation is a time of great trial. We'll hear a lot of tribulation in the Revelation book. So please keep this word in mind, tribulation. And then you have Christ's second coming, then the millennial reign of Christ, and then the last judgment. So this view believes that after the tribulation, Christ's 1,000-year reign will happen on earth, and only then the last judgment. The second chart, the second picture that you can see, number 2, is that which most of the church has believed throughout history. Okay, that is the second coming of Christ, that is the rapture that we all know. So the rapture will happen before the tribulation, and then the tribulation will start, and then Christ's second coming will happen with the church. That is the battle of Armageddon. Okay, where Christ will defeat the Antichrist and his army. And then there's the 1,000-year reign of Christ, and only after that, the last judgment. Okay. Now, this is the view that the church has taken for most of its existence. Okay. So, majority church believes this view. Why do they believe this view? Because, like I said last class, that after chapter 3, the word church, ecclesia, is not mentioned in the rest of the book of Revelation. Okay. So the church has believed that right before the tribulation starts, the great trial by the Antichrist, the beast, and the false prophet, the church will be raptured. So we will not face the tribulation. It will be raptured, the church. So who will face the tribulation? So in the book of Revelation, we recognize that during the tribulation, there will be many new believers. They will face the tribulation. So, in a way, the church will be saved from the tribulation as a reward for making the decision now. For us to make a decision now, that was the reward we are getting. And so, we are not waiting for the last minute to make our decision to follow Christ. Okay. So, the church has believed that the rapture will happen before the tribulation starts. And one of the reasons is because chapter 3 is the last time the word church is mentioned in the book of Revelation. Chapter 4 onwards, when the actual vision starts for John, there's no mention of the church. That means the church may not be there on earth when the tribulation starts. Okay, so that is one. And then you have the third, which is the post millennial. That is, they believe that everything has happened, and now that Christ millennium will happen anytime soon, and then the second coming or the last judgment, and then the final is the symbolic millennium, which they believe that Christ's 1,000-year reign is happening now. Okay, so the tribulation, everything has already happened. The 1,000-year reign is happening now, and we are only waiting for the second coming or the last judgment. Okay, so these are the different views the church has taken in terms of the tribulation, in terms of the rapture, in terms of the 1,000-year reign of Christ and the last judgment. Okay. Whatever view you want to take, there are scriptural basis for that. The scriptures support each of the 4 views. And when we reach that part, certain scriptures, when we read in Revelation, I will tell you why certain people believe the kind of things that they believe about the last days and things like that. Okay. But like I said, most of the time the churches believe the number 2 wala understanding, that is pre-tribulational, premillennialism, premillennialism. Okay, that is what the churches believe. Now, let's quickly go to chapter 4. And like I said, from chapter 4 onwards, no mention of the word church. Okay, only believers, that word is mentioned, but the mention of the word church is not there from chapter 4 till the end of Revelation. Okay, now this is how Revelation chapter 4 starts. After this, I looked. After this means after the 7, messages to the 7 churches that we found in chapter 2 and chapter 3. After this, John says, I looked, and there before me was a door standing open in heaven. And the voice I had first heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this." At once I was in the spirit, and there before me was a throne in heaven with someone sitting on it. And the one who sat there had the appearance of jasper and ruby. A rainbow that shone like an emerald encircled the throne. Surrounding the throne were 24 other thrones, and seated on them were 24 elders. They were dressed in white and had crowns of gold on their heads. Now, I want to pause here and talk to you about, who John sees on the throne. Now, it was obviously God on the throne, but when you read verses 2 and verse 3, John shows so much of reverence for God. Because the thing is, when you see God in his glory, we would recognize that how, we need to have so much of reverence. See, nowadays, because Jesus introduced God as Father to us, sometimes we take God very casually, right? Because we say he's our Father, so we take him very casually. But when you read the book of Revelation, you recognize that every time John is having this vision of the glory of God, there is no casualness in it at all. Because when you see God's glory, there will be a lot of reverence, a lot of formal reverence, like it's needed for a king. That is what. And here you see John doing exactly the same thing, right? He says there was one sitting on the throne, and that one sitting on the throne had the appearance of jasper and ruby and stuff like that. So it's a very formal reverence that a king demands, is what we find in the book of Revelation. So when we look at God as Father, let's not forget that he's also the king of the universe. So there are times when we can be casual with him, but let us not always be casual with him, because I think there is some sort of reverence that is needed when we approach God, since he's the king of the universe. Okay, so this is what the Bible says. Now, when you look at the 24 other thrones, and seated on them were 24 elders, traditionally the church has believed that 24 meant 12 representatives from the tribe of Israel, and then the 12 apostles, total 24, meaning there were representatives both from the Jews as well as from the Gentiles. So the 24, again, remember, these are very symbolic languages, okay? And when you look at Revelation, as we go deeper, you'll recognize we cannot take it very literally. There's a lot of symbolism attached to it. And this is also very symbolic. So 24 thrones means that the Jews were represented, that is the 12 tribes, as well as the Gentiles were represented by the 12 apostles. So 24 thrones. They were dressed in white and had crowns of gold on their heads. Okay, now Revelation 6 to 8. Also, in front of the throne, there was what looked like a sea of glass, clear as crystal. In the center, around the throne, were four living creatures, and they were covered with eyes in front and in back. Okay, now the crystal glass, the sea of glass, which means that even though John is seeing the throne, it is not easily accessible, right? Why? Because of God's glory, God's holiness, God's, the reverence that he demands. So the sea of glass is basically talking about that, okay? That John just did not have access directly to the throne. There was a sea of glass, okay? There was a distance between where he was and where the throne was, just to symbolize the glory and the majesty of God on his throne, okay? So we need to always keep that in mind. And like I said, in the center, there were four living creatures, and they were covered with eyes in front and in back. Verse 7. The first living creature was like a lion. The second was like an ox. The third had a face like a man. The fourth was like a flying eagle. Each of the four living creatures had 6 wings and was covered with eyes all around, even under its wings. Day and night, they never stopped saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come." Okay, so this is basically the vision that John is having. There are these four living creatures, one the face of a lion, the other one face of a man, then it was the face of an ox and the face of a bird. Okay, now there are different interpretations of these animals, okay, these creatures. Now, again, understand, we don't know what the reality is. We don't know what the truth is. These are just attempts that human beings we are making, okay, that theologians have made, Bible commentators have made. Now, when you look at the lion, the man, the ox, and the eagle, one explanation is that the lion represents the beasts. So the beasts are represented before God. The man represents human beings. So human beings are represented before God. The ox represents all the herbivorous animals. So they are represented before God, and the eagle represents the birds. And so they are represented before God. So basically, entire creation is represented before God. Okay, so that is something that, some say that it could mean like that. Now, a similar vision is also recorded for us in Isaiah. Okay, so when you look at Isaiah, Isaiah's vision is a little similar, but there are also some differences. Like for John, these were four separate living creatures, and some commentators take them as representing the beasts, the human beings, the birds, as well as the herbivore animals, or the beasts of labor and stuff like that. So all creation is represented before God. Okay, but when you look at the same description given in in Ezekiel, then it is different. And I'll read that for you in Ezekiel chapter 1, verse 10. In Ezekiel, these are not separate creatures. It is one person, okay, one angel with the face of an eagle, lion, man, as well as ox. And similarly, there are four such beings standing before God. So according to John, they were separate beings, each having one face. But according to Ezekiel, one person had all the four faces. Okay, so this is a little different. So that is why you recognize we cannot take it literally. Okay, it is a lot. It is very symbolic what is written for us, and as a result, we can attempt to understand what this symbolism meant. Okay, so one explanation that I said was, like I said, they represent the different parts of creation, or the different parts of the kingdom, of the animal kingdom. Okay, now what does Ezekiel say? Ezekiel says this from verse 4 onwards. I looked and I saw a windstorm coming out of the north, an immense cloud with flashing lightning and surrounded by brilliant light. The center of the fire looked like glowing metal, and in the fire was what looked like four living creatures. In appearance, their form was human, but each of them had four faces and four wings. Their legs were straight, their feet were like those of a calf and gleamed like burnished bronze. Under their wings, on their four sides, they had human hands. All four of them had faces and wings, and the wings of one touched the wings of another. Each one went straight ahead. They did not turn as they moved. Their faces looked like this. Each of the four had the face of a human being, and on the right side, each had the face of a lion, and on the left, the face of an ox. Each also had the face of an eagle. So, like I said, Ezekiel's description is also very similar, but little different in the details. For John, each of them had separate heads, and they were separate creatures. For Ezekiel, each creature had all the four heads of a human, of a lion, of an ox, as well as an eagle. Now, what is the other possible explanation to these creatures? Okay, now this is the other possible explanation. Who could these creatures be? One, like a lion means representing king. And so many commentators say when we read the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is represented like the king, the lion, okay, the lion of Judah. Like an ox represents servant. So when you read the Gospel of Mark, you recognize the servanthood of Jesus Christ. Like a man, like the Son of Man, Luke presents Jesus as the Son of Man. And like a flying eagle represents divinity, the Gospel of John represents Jesus and his divinity. Okay, so this is the other possible explanation of the four living creatures. The first explanation, like I said, was that each of the creation is represented before God. Now, this is the second explanation, that they could possibly mean that God is basically Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. So the lion, the ox, the man, and the flying eagle are symbolic representation of God's story of redemption for the world. Okay, and when you read, and when we read chapter 5, we will see how all of them surround the Lamb. That is, all of them surround Jesus. So this could also be a possible explanation that always 24/7 continuously God's plan of salvation, okay, for the world is represented before him all the time through the lion, the ox, the man, and the flying eagle, representing how the gospels demonstrate Jesus Christ. Okay, so you can take any one of these explanations. You can take both the explanations together and add it to your understanding. But these are some of the possible meanings of these creatures. Okay, again, They may not be literal, very symbolic, because Ezekiel's description and John's description are a little different. But these are some of the possible explanations of who these creatures could mean. Okay. Now, when you look at Revelation 5 to 19, so chapter 4, basically that is what most of what it mentioned, and then they all worship God. Now, when you look at Revelation 5 to 19, Revelation 5 to 19 actually is giving a very detailed account of a vision that Daniel had, that is recorded for us in Daniel chapter 9, verses 20 to 27. Okay. So understand how this prophecy is interconnected throughout the Bible in the Old Testament as well as the New Testament. Ezekiel talks about a similar thing. Daniel is mentioning about similar things. Revelation is talking about. So there is an interconnectedness between the Old and the New Testament. So Revelation 5 to 9 is basically a very detailed account of what God reveals to Daniel, that is recorded for us in Daniel chapter 9, verses 20 to 27. Okay. Now let me read for you very quickly what is mentioned for us in Daniel chapter 9, verses 20 to 27. Okay. A lot of details are given, but I'll try my best to simplify it so that at least you can understand. Okay. Not all the details may be important for us, but the ones that are important, we'll try and understand it. Okay. So this is what Daniel saw. While I was speaking and praying, confessing my sin and the sin of my people, Israel, and making my request to the Lord my God for his holy hill, while I was still in prayer, Gabriel, the man I had seen in the earlier vision, came to me in swift flight about the time of the evening sacrifice. He instructed me and said to me, Daniel, I have now come to give you insight and understanding. Soon as you began to pray, a word went out, which I have come to tell you. For you are highly esteemed. Therefore, consider the word and understand the vision. This is the vision. 77s are decreed for your people and your holy city to finish transgression, to put an end to sin, to atone for wickedness, to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal a vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. Know and understand this. From the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. Okay. So let me just take a pause here. Okay. Now, what are these sevens? Sevens represent 7 years. So here the angel is telling Daniel that from the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Now, Daniel, we know, was in exile in Babylon. And only years later, under Cyrus, okay, under Cyrus, the decree is given, that is recorded for us in Ezra and Nehemiah, that the decree is given. Cyrus says that the Jerusalem, that the Jews can return and rebuild Jerusalem. So what is the angel saying? The angel is saying that from the time Cyrus makes that decree, from the time, okay, I'll once again request if you can be mindful of just keeping yourself on mute, that would be helpful. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. And the co-hosts are here. If you can also make sure that the others are muted. Shubhankar, Niloma, I think that could also help this thing. Okay. Now, so again, let's go back to the 7, okay, because it's important for us to understand. Sevens represent 7 years. Okay. So the angel Gabriel is telling Daniel that listen, from the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, that is, until Jesus comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. Matlab 7 times 7 years. So 7 sevens will be 49 years and then 62 sevens. So when you look at 62 plus 7, 62 plus 7 is basically how much? 62 plus 7, 69. So 69 times 7 years will pass. And that is when, you know, the anointed one will come. And actually, from the time Cyrus passed the decree till Jesus comes, when you calculate it, it is actually 69 sevens, exactly what Daniel says. Okay. So 69 times 7 years will pass. And that is what Daniel, you know, is revealed here. Okay. Now, verse 26 says, after the 62 sevens, the anointed one will be put to death and will have nothing. Okay. So this is exactly what happened. Jesus was put to death. Okay. The people of the ruler, that is the Antichrist who will come, will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come like a flood. War will continue until the end, and desolations have been decreed. Now, he will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. That is now the Antichrist. He will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. That is for 7 years. In the middle of the seven, that is 3.5 years, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. And at the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation until the end that is decreed is poured out on him. Now, I know there's a lot of sevens and stuff like that. Forget about everything. Understand that this last seven that is recorded for us in verse 27, okay, the last 7 years is what Revelation records for us, okay. So the 62 sevens and the 7 sevens before that, total 69 sevens have already passed, okay, from the time Cyrus gave permission to rebuild Jerusalem till the time Jesus came. And now there is this gap for that last seven. And this last 7 years is what Revelation records for us, okay. So in the middle of the 7 years, that is in the middle of 3.5 years, again, it is very, very significant for us. And we will look from the book of Revelation how it is, okay. So please remember that Daniel's verse 27, chapter 9, verse 27, this one verse is what Revelation chapter 5 till the end talks about and gives in details what will happen within these 7 years. That is that 1/7, okay. It was revealed to Daniel, and now, this is what we see, okay. Now, this is the context, like I said, it is the context of Daniel chapter 9, verses 20 to 27. The events of this 1/7, that is the last 7 years, is recorded for us in Revelation chapter 6 to 19. That is the time of tribulation, okay. Now, different interpretations of Revelation before we quickly look at chapter 5, and then we will be through, okay. Some take Revelation as past history. So when you read Daniel, you recognize, a lot of the prophecies have already happened till Christ has come. So many people take Revelation as past history, okay? Because when you look at, the way Revelation is written and the descriptions, a lot of it seems like it is past history. So basically now we are in the millennial reign of Christ, only waiting for the last judgment, okay? Which is what some people do believe, that the tribulation has happened, everything has happened. So everything that Revelation records is already happened. We are now in the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And then, we are waiting for his final judgment. But some believe it is also continuous history, okay? And which we will see, may make sense because you recognize it's a continuous history, sometimes past, sometimes present, sometimes it talks about future. So there's a lot of this thing also we see in the book of Revelation. And then some take it as completely prophetical, yet to happen. And most of us are used to taking the book of Revelation as completely prophetical, yet to happen. But please understand that for the church, all these three views have been considered. Some take it only as past history. We are only waiting for the last judgment of Christ. Some take it as continuous history, that, things in Revelation have already occurred. Some are happening now, but some are yet to happen. But most of it, the church has taken it as prophetical history, that everything is yet to happen, okay? Where we stand now, that everything is yet to happen. So there are different interpretations of Revelation. Now let's quickly look at Revelation chapter 5, verses 1 to 8. The reason I'm doing it today, chapter 4 and chapter 5, because it is more like an introduction, okay? It doesn't give too much of details about what's going to happen, but more of an introduction. So if we do it, I think it's better. Quickly, let me read that for you. Then I saw in the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writings on both sides and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside. I wept and wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals." Then I saw a lamb, that is Jesus, looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. The lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. So it gives explanation. What are the 7 horns and 7 eyes? These are the 7 spirits of God. And I'll tell you what the meaning of the 7 spirits of God is. Verse 7. He went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne. And when he had taken it, the four living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's people. Okay, so when you look at Revelation chapter 5, verses 1 to 8, before all the tribulation, before all the judgment, the focus is on the throne, the focus is on God and the Lamb, on Jesus Christ. And here is one interesting thing, right? When John is looking at this vision of Jesus Christ, Jesus had already resurrected and ascended into heaven, but he's seen the Lamb as if looking as if it had been slain. So understand that the sacrifice of Jesus Christ on the cross to us may seem 2000 years old, but in heaven it is as fresh like it happened on the day when he was crucified. Okay, that when John is seeing the vision, the lamb looked as if it had been slain. So the sacrifice that Jesus paid is not forgotten. It is fresh in heaven, and as a result, the redemption work is continuing, and it is as powerful now as it was 2000 years ago. Okay, now Revelation chapter 5 verses 1 to 8, what are some key lessons that we can learn? One, this is actually introducing the seal judgment of chapter 6. So from chapter 6 we will see the seal judgments, and we will also see the timeline that they talk about, but we look at it next week, not today. Okay, so chapter 5 is basically introducing the seal judgments. So God has the seals, the seven seals on it, and who will open the seal? The lamb. He is worthy to open the seal. So only after the lamb opens from chapter 6 is John able to see what the seal judgments are. The seven spirits of God in many ways is linked to Isaiah chapter 11 verse 1 to 2, which talks about God's sevenfold spirits. So these are not like seven number spirits of God, but the sevenfold spirits. Seven, again, remember, in biblical times, in biblical literature, considered as a very complete number. Okay, now when you read Isaiah chapter 11 verses 1 to 2, this is what it says: a shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse, from his roots a branch will bear fruit. It's a prophecy about Jesus. Okay, verse 2 says, the spirit of the Lord will rest on him. So this is the first fold, the spirit of the Lord. The spirit of wisdom, that is second; of understanding, that is third; the spirit of counsel, that is fourth; and of might, that is five; the spirit of knowledge, that is sixth; and fear of the Lord, that is seven. So this is the sevenfold spirit of God. That is, God's spirit is complete. Okay, it will rest on